Andrei Andrievsky, political analyst and editor-in-chief of the media outlet Ava TV Moldova, is joining our broadcast. Andrei, we're glad to welcome you. Good afternoon.
Likewise. Hello.
Andrei, to start off, I'd like to ask you this. What is your assessment of this step taken by the leadership of Moldova, by President Maia Sandu, respectively? How do you see it here? Can we, see this as a mutual story, so to speak? Is this more of a practical step or perhaps a symbolic one? Or is this, in principle, a set of decisions that, one way or another, are meant to move official Chisinau further away from Moscow?
Well, in fact, this is something that has been a long time coming, and now, essentially, these are the final touches to a situation that has been developing here for years. The CIS and its rules, in fact, haven't worked for us for quite a long time. That is, we haven't gained any benefit from it. Moreover, right now, few people noticed that when Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan was in Moscow speaking with Putin, Putin made it clear that it is impossible to be in both the CIS and the European Union at the same time. And although all the pro-Russian forces in Moldova have been telling us for decades, why not? Let's be with both sides. Let's be a bridge between East and West. Let's live on the bridge. Isn't that just wonderful? And now their spiritual leader, the spiritual leader of Russia, Putin, has said that no, that's impossible, that it's either one way or the other. Well, in this situation, the choice is obvious as to where we want to go. We want to be part of civilization, to be in Europe. So now basically what's happening is that the last remaining documentary foundations are simply being cleared away in order to completely withdraw from this organization. And here, of course, our local pro-Russian activists are still hysterical, claiming that millions of Moldovans live there, which is absolute nonsense, because even a few years ago, Russia's official statistics, the migration department or whatever it's called, reported that fewer than 100,000 remained, and that was before the active phase of the war against Ukraine. I think that since then, the number has become even smaller. And I'm practically certain that everyone who is still there are people who long ago obtained Moldovan citizenship, or rather, Russian citizenship, and they really do not need any support from Moldova. They are now more citizens of Russia than of Moldova. Therefore, we have no practical reasons to remain in this organization. And regarding what was mentioned in your report about the debt to the CIS, in reality, the CIS is essentially Russia. That is, we all understand that at first it was created as a sort of replacement for the USSR, but in essence it became not an economic replacement, but a political one. Once again, Moscow seized all the levers of control and started to lead. And here's what I'm getting at. Right now, regarding this debt, the thing is that Russia caused us trouble on the Dniester by bombing the hydro facility on the Ukrainian side, and all those oils ended up in the Dniester. As a result, Moldova had to spend a lot of money to clean it up, because practically our entire country relies on water from the Dniester. So now I think we can present Russia with the bill. Plus, they also damaged our power line on Ukrainian territory, the one that runs from Romania through Ukraine. And again, we are forced to pay for its restoration. And also, I think that all these bills can be presented to Moscow as some kind of offset. Let them pay this debt to the CIS for us, because I fully understand that they won't pay us in cash. So, well, that's how it is.
To carry out such an offset, right, Andrei, if I understand correctly, like we give you this and you...
Something like that, yes.
Yes. But here, there's also the question that Russia will probably still owe us after all the calculations, which, as it seems to me, and there's a lot of rational sense in what you're saying, should be carried out by official Chisinau.
Absolutely. As you can see, in reality, their ongoing sabotage against us is still continuing at this very moment. It's not something that happened just once. I'm not even talking about the enormous damage they cause us in the political sphere, bribing politicians, bribing citizens. For example, what they did during our recent elections when hundreds of thousands of citizens were bribed, and as a result, these citizens broke the law and are now facing huge fines. In the end, of course, this hit many people very hard. And if it hadn't been for the Kremlin's malicious political will from the very beginning, none of this would have happened. So the damage here is multi-layered and multifaceted. And generally speaking, of course, we need to distance ourselves from this source of problems as quickly as possible, because someone might say, wait, this is the CIS and you're talking about Russia. I repeat, it's the same thing. Today, Russia and the CIS are completely synonymous because absolutely all processes within the Commonwealth of Independent States are controlled by Moscow. They make all the decisions there. And by the way, as an example, despite the fact that we have an agreement with them within the CS framework on duty-free trade and the free movement of goods, they constantly violated it. That is, they imposed various embargoes on certain sectors, they introduced additional duties, they created problems for us in trade, so it doesn't work. And this clearly shows that the CIS is, in fact, an absolutely dead structure, which is still being kept alive by the Kremlin for, let's say, its last attempts at political influence over Moldova, its last attempts. There are still countries that are quite heavily influenced, including through the CIS.
Andrei, tell me, when we talk about this whole post-Soviet story, or essentially Soviet, since many experts say that, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the imperial story itself hasn't really ended yet, and that Russia, by creating various structures, organizations, alliances, and so on, has tried to pull everything back under its control, once again, to gather it all together on the ruins of the Soviet system. But I wanted to ask you specifically about this story with the CIS. Tell me, how sensitive is the topic of all these post-Soviet structures, post-Soviet organizations, and the Commonwealth of Independent States itself for people, for civil society, in the electoral field?
Well, look, here we need to clearly understand that for us, this is only sensitive for those who work in Russia's interests. Unfortunately, we still have quite a lot of such people. We have a bunch of public organizations, a bunch of politicians, some activists, bloggers, and so on. These are the ones who are still being supported by Russia. Of course, for them, everything that Moscow orders is sensitive. So if they're told today to make a fuss about leaving the CIS, then that's it for them. For several days, that's all they talk about. They make a fuss about leaving the CIS. If they're told tomorrow, I don't know, to support Iran, they'll support Iran. If they're told the day after tomorrow, so you have to understand that these people have absolutely no internal compass. In other words, whatever they're told from Moscow, that's what they react to. But overall, in society, I didn't see any reaction at all to us leaving the CS, because if this had happened 10 years ago, it would have been a really big deal. Back then, well, I think there might even have been protests, because at that time those ties with Russia were still strong, and there were strong, openly pro-Russian sentiments. And then, yes, maybe it would have prompted some people, a part of society, to harshly criticize it. Now, in the public sphere, aside from those who are obligated, whose job it is to respond to whatever the Kremlin needs, I don't see any reaction at all. That is, not a single person has gone out to protest or taken to the streets over this. Not a single person, nothing. Even if you just look at the social media of ordinary people, the reaction is zero. Actually, I would even say in some cases there's a sense of satisfaction, because, well, everyone understands that this is a dead structure, and yet we have to pay 3 million lei for it every year. Why all of a sudden? What does it give us? It's just feeding this CIS apparatus, which is completely pointless and ultimately used against us. So it gives absolutely no political influence whatsoever. Yes, of course, figures like Igor Dodon, the former president and one of the main pro-Russian activists, have already said that when they come to power, they will bring everything back, as he always says. But fortunately, that's almost impossible, because his ratings keep falling. And even within their party, they have problems. An internal split is looming. So his stories about bringing everything back are more in the realm of fantasy now.
Well, you have to, to bring it back, exactly using the words you mentioned. Well, it's difficult, like they say, you can't put the stuffing back into the sausage. This is probably the same story for all the structures that the Russian Federation is trying to keep alive. And finally, Andrei, tell me, can Moscow somehow respond to such actions by official Chisinau? Well, aside from the likes of Zakharova, Peskov, and others who come out in public and say things like, oh, what an unfriendly country, oh, they'll think about it, oh, they'll ask us to come back, and how should we look at this? Yes, I mean, political or economic influence from Moscow, which it could use for this purpose, to bring everything back, as you said, to how it was before.
Well, what you're talking about, Zakharova's statements, they almost every time she speaks, part of it is dedicated to Moldova. There's so much bile, poison, and all that in them. This happens all the time anyway. And of course, she has already commented on it. Moreover, she said that, in fact, we haven't left anywhere. It only seems to us that it's not so easy to leave from there, and that they need to be warned in advance and asked. Well, in short, it's all their usual nonsensical rhetoric. As for other tools, you see, Russia is actually using everything it can against us. So basically, they don't need any new excuse. It's the same as with Ukraine. Some people say don't make harsh statements or else they'll do something else, but they do whatever they can anyway. All the evil they're able to do, they do. And here, none of our statements or lack thereof or any actions will change anything. That is to say, if they could find a way to inflict significantly more serious harm upon us, without drawing further intense negative reactions from their partners like the Chinese or from Trump, then, so to speak, they would already be actively bombing our positions. But for now, they simply do not want to take such an extreme and drastic step. Everything else related to the economy, to various provocations, all of that is already happening today. What I mentioned earlier, the sabotage of that power line and the pollution of the Dniester, none of that is accidental either, especially with that power line which runs through a field and was hit by a drone from hundreds of kilometers away. So to say that this somehow happened by accident, that it just landed in that field where there's nothing except that power line and it hit it, it's obvious that this was a deliberate act against Moldova. Well, maybe they'll do something else like this. But I don't think this is in any way connected to what's happening here with us, because their general policy is that as long as Moldova remains defiant, as long as Moldova is moving toward the European Union, it is considered a hostile state, and therefore they must harm it as much as possible whenever they can. So at this point, nothing else depends on us anymore. To prevent this, we would have to go and bow to Putin, I don't know, kiss his knee, and then maybe he would forgive us and everything would change. But that's just not possible. So accordingly, they will keep trying to do something, and this has nothing to do with the CIS.
Andrei, thank you for the conversation. Thank you for joining our broadcast.
Thank you.
Yes, feel free to come by. We'll be glad to have you. Andrei Andrievsky, political analyst and editor-in-chief of the media outlet TV Moldova, was with us live.